Hello guests, and welcome to the Literature Circle. Tonight, we have a special guest, all the way from Montague the Beautiful. Gym teacher and Masters of Literacy student Miss Alana Trainer.
That is physical education teacher.
Oh yes, of course, my apologies. What was I thinking?
Dumbass.
What did you say?
Oh, nothing at all.
So the reason we have brought you to our studios here at Eastlink Cable is to highlight you as a literate person. I have a series of questions to ask you, so perhaps we will get started.
Sounds good to me.
So I think we will start our discussion with your writing habits. Describe yourself as a writer. And how often do you write for pleasure on your own?
I would not say writing is something that I like to do in my daily life. Writing is more of a professional activity, either at work or academically for my masters. There is some personal writing that I do as a parent, but it is not very often.
Please describe it.
Well, I like to record funny things my kids have said, so that I can share them with them when they are adults.
Can you give us an example?
When Charlie was 2 years old, he came home from his daycare and was occasionally saying the words, "Ass biter." We thought maybe an older child had told the words to him because they thought it would be funny. We decided not to draw attention to the words, and maybe Charlie would just forget them. One day while driving by a construction site, Charlie got excited and started to point at a machine scooping up some earth. He pointed and said, "A spider." It was an excavator. In terms of personal writing, I also have a book I am filling in that is kind of a history of our family, with important dates, milestones, and other things.
Sounds great. You were talking earlier about not typically enjoying the writing process. Can you please give us more details?
I do not enjoy writing because often it is being dictated or forced from outside sources.
Can you give us an example, please?
Well, as an educator, a lot of writing is forced on us. I feel this writing takes away from time that could be better spent with my students, or spent on developing good lesson plans with co-workers.
Go on, please.
Well, for instance, being told that we have to write comments on report cards, but the comments they want us to give are too restrictive and do not really talk about the student or their abilities. I also do not like professional readings that are passed out at staff meetings that I feel are unnecessary. Some of that stuff is a waste of paper.
I agree with that. Do you ever struggle with professional readings yourself? And if so, what do you think the cause of your struggle is?
I do find that I sometimes struggle with readings that I do not have a contextual background with, such as historical readings, deeply philosophical works, or readings heavy with academic wording that I am not familiar with.
What do you do when you are reading those kinds of texts?
I find those texts take me longer to read. I often have to reread sentences or paragraphs for meaning and clarification. I have to put a lot of energy into focusing, so I do not get lost by the end of the sentence.
Describe yourself as a reader, and tell us about reading that you really enjoy.
I consider myself to be an avid reader. I read every night after the kids are asleep.
50 Shades of Grey?
What was that?
I asked you, what do you like to read?
I read novels, especially anything by Jodi Picoult. Magazines such as Everyday with Rachel Ray, the daily newspaper, weekly Eastern Graphic, and parenting magazines such as Parents. I also enjoy reading with my 2 young children.
What do you read with your kids?
I read Dora the Explorer with my daughter and with my son. Animal books, especially with sea creatures, scary mammals like vampire bats, dinosaurs, just about anything that is about fierce animals.
Sounds like fun. What was your favorite childhood reading?
I really enjoyed reading Curious George.
As an adult?
The Da Vinci Code was one of my favorites.
Great book. Let us now switch gears and talk about you as a listener. How would you describe yourself as a listener?
I struggle with listening because as a young girl, I had many ear infections and this has caused me to have difficulty with hearing. I often need to see people's lips to understand them.
Very interesting. Besides having difficulty hearing, do you find yourself to be more of a listener or a talker?
I guess it depends on the situation. In more formal settings such as staff meetings or classroom discussions in my master's courses, I tend to be more of a listener, I guess, than a talker. In those situations, I like to hear what is going on and think clearly about it. I like to listen and reflect on what has been said. I tend to talk only when I have something I feel is relevant or meaningful to add to the discussion.
I understand. Are you shy or nervous talking in public?
Not in front of my students. If you guys are out there watching me from home, we will be running the beep tests on Monday. All kidding aside, I tend to only get nervous talking in front of large groups of adults. I was student council president in high school, so talking to young people comes naturally to me, but not so much for adults. Case in point, I remember my first master's class. I was so nervous. I almost threw up.
I am sorry to hear that. Well, shall we continue? Let's talk about literacy growing up at home.
Well, I grew up in Cardigan with one older sister, where my mother was an elementary school teacher, and my father was an insurance salesman.
So you were from Cardigan. That reminds me of a delicious pizza from Famous Peppers. I am getting hungry. Hey, behind the stage, can we get pizza for lunch? What do you mean that is not in the budget? Who is in charge here? Oh, not them. Well, call Stephanie and complain.
Can I finish here?
Sorry, please go on.
We always had lots of books in the house with Mom being a teacher. I guess that is just like my own house now. Well, my mother read to us constantly as we grew up. Every night there were bedtime stories. Also, growing up, my mother would help me with my homework, especially my sentence structure. I would tell her what I wanted to say and she would dictate every sentence to me, punctuation and all. I think her influence and my experience with my grade 12 English teacher, Mr. Bobby Nicholson, are why my grammar skills are strong to this day. Our house was a house where literacy was always on display and important. My mother and father were always reading and modeling what a literate person was.
Very interesting. Let us now talk about your school experiences with literacy.
Reading, writing, and speaking came naturally to me. I never struggled with traditional literacies growing up.
What were some of your fondest memories growing up?
I enjoyed filling in my little orange journal, especially drawing pictures that went with the stories.
What was your favorite literacy project?
My grade 12 English teacher, Mr. Nicholson, and his multi-genre project was one of my favorite memories.
Could you please explain a multi-genre project for those of our viewers who tuned in expecting to watch Fishing with Friends?
A multi-genre project is a writing assignment where students get to pick their own topic and produce numerous creative writing pieces that relate to that topic. I chose to do Bloody Mary and write numerous letters from various perspectives, including Mary and her jailers, as well as poems, short stories, and other forms of writing.
This sounds like fun. Please carry on.
I also added physical elements to the letters to make them look like they were aged.
How did you do that?
I carefully singed the corners with a lighter.
Wow, neat. Do you have any negative experiences involving literature in school?
As I said earlier, most of my experiences were positive. I do, however, remember one particularly boring class that I had.
What made it boring?
The teacher was very monotone. He taught from binders of prepared overheads. This was the only class that I would fall asleep in.
Sounds like a biology class I took in high school. What sorts of out-of-school literacies did you participate in as a child and continue to this day?
Growing up, I played sports such as softball, ringette, and figure skating. I was also involved in step dancing. Today I garden and play softball.
Well, Miss Trainer, we are running out of time. Let us finish up with some literature connections.
Sounds good to me.
So what literary experiences from our everyday lives can educators take to the classroom with them?
The things that I like reading in school and in my everyday reading today are things that I have chosen for myself. As educators, it is important to give students choices, so that reading and writing, for that matter, does not become a chore. I was much more motivated when I was able to do something that I was interested in.
Well, it wraps up our show for tonight. We would like to thank Miss Alana Trainer for being our guest here at Eastlink Studios. Please join us 2 weeks from now on our regular scheduled time, 12:30 a.m. on Monday night. Our special guests will be those very informative literature coaches. And we will be bringing in musical guest Flo Rider. Yes, folks, Flo Rider, to talk about the importance of bringing musical literacy into the classroom.
Wow.